Accord.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
David Lee. Yeah.
Yes.
Specifically, yeah.
Oh my god.
We're gonna give them a late speech.
Wait, I need to pull up our app. Oh my god. Oh wait, I go like this.
And Judge, if it wasn't obvious, we're friends.
Yeah, alright.
We're the bestest of friends.
This one's fine.
Okay, there we go. I have it. Alright, we're good to go. If you guys are good to go.
Can I sit here?
Okay.
So,
I'm definitely copying them.
is everybody ready?
Are you recording? Yeah,
So
it's
everyone
ready.
know. Over the last 50 years, India's growing population, robust economy, and strategic location have led it to become a force to be reckoned with on the global stage. A key factor contributing to India's historic rise is its ability to balance its strategic interests while maintaining a non-aligned foreign policy. Because joining the Artemis Accords would inhibit India's strategic foreign policy approach, Langley is proud to negate, resolved, the Republic of India should sign the Artemis Accords. Our sole contention is it's better safe than sorry. Today's space is hotly contested. As Geary 21 of Gateway House explains, the Artemis Accords have prompted Russia and China to formulate their own bloc to counter the West. Thus far, India has remained distant from the consequences of joining one bloc over another while reaping the benefits of their neutrality. Geary continues that historically, India has had the unique ability to engage in space diplomacy with nations from both blocs. India's unique strategy of maintaining neutrality is key to preserving a delicate global balance. Rohera 22 of Tufts University contextualizes that through its neutrality, India still cooperates on a section of space activities with the United States, allowing it to maintain partial alignment with the bloc. Unfortunately, signing on to the Artemis Accords would signal a reversal of India's neutrality. Ramanathan 21 of the Takshashila Institution explains that since Russia and China view Artemis as US-centric, any Indian involvement reduces opportunities for collaboration and sets a dangerous precedent. For example, Berger 22 of AT explains that China views its own space program as a means to advance geopolitical interests. The official Chinese reaction to the Accords is one of disdain, and G20 of the Diplomat figures that Chinese officials fear the Accords' impact on their soft power projection. Thus, India joining the Accords would topple a fragile global order, as Schumann 23 of the Atlantic explains that when it comes to tensions between the US and China, India acts as a crucial counterweight and is the single most important geopolitical frontier between the two nations. Hickett 17, a Schwarzman scholar, concludes, China sets a strong emphasis on the power implications of space, and stronger US-China cooperation would antagonize Beijing. Heightened US-India space cooperation would cause India greater risk, escalating military tensions and undermining regional cooperation. Such a development would have numerous devastating impacts. Jiang Xue 22 of the China Institute of International Studies have explained that the India-China relationship has shown a momentum of recovery as they have maintained communication and eased border tensions. They conclude that China and India must continue to maintain dialogue. Unfortunately, China has a history of responding to perceived threats with escalation. The United States Institute of Peace 2022 finds that China and India have been locked in tense relations across contested borders in the past, and there are now fewer safeguards in place to prevent nuclear war. Even absent nuclear conflict, page 16 of RCD explains that a conventional war with China could lead to over 100 million deaths. Even beyond militaristic escalation, China has cut off trade when its interests have been threatened. Empirically, The Guardian 21 explains that China halted all trade with Lithuania after they exchanged diplomatic offices with Taiwan. Disruptions to trade would be devastating, as IANS 21 explains that India is tightly connected to Chinese trade, with Davis 22 quantifying that hundreds of millions of people are reliant on the relationship. Additionally, the German Institute for Global and Area Studies in 2022 explains that increasing tensions spill over and affect all other areas of cooperation. This is seen most significantly in the fight against climate change, as the Institute continues that preventing dangerous climate change requires global cooperation between India and China specifically. Thus, they conclude if India and China do not join forces, global climate cooperation is certain to fail. Solving climate issues would be incredibly beneficial, as Taylor 19 concludes 150 million people worldwide are killed for every single degree increase in warming. To preserve strategic neutrality, Langley is very proud to negate. Thank you.
So this is Thomas Jefferson for the Right. My time will start now. Jaden and I affirm resolve the Republic of India should sign the Artemis Accords. Our sole argument is promoting prosperity. Signing the Artemis Accords would create two-way benefits for both India and Are we neg?
No, you have.
Wait, can I restart? Sorry, can I restart? Alright. I will start now.
You gotta go with your first thought there.
Alright, time will start now. Jaden and I affirm resolve the Republic of India should sign the Artemis Accords. Our sole argument is promoting prosperity. Signing the Artemis Accords would create two-way benefits for both India and Accord members. According to the Taksha Institute in 2022, participating in the Accords will help India gain a foothold in shaping norms for space governance in the coming years. If India opts to sign Artemis Accords, it will open an important avenue for cooperation. These benefits manifest in two key ways. The first is advancing agriculture. The Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO, has encountered failure alongside terrestrial issues. The New Indian Express in 2021 finds the mission failure of ISRO to put its most advanced satellite in orbit came at a time when India most needed it. The crucial satellite failed to ignite, causing the collapse of the entire mission. It is time for ISRO to put its head down and overcome the failure. This was due to a lack of funding, as Khan in 22 states that if ISRO had the same budget as NASA and other major space agencies, they would have the same prestige. The annual budget differences between NASA and ISRO are almost $20 billion apart. But following the signing of the Artemis Accords, both the UAE and Saudi Arabia increased funding to their space programs, specifically in the satellite industry. Henry in 23 writes, the UAE established an $817 million fund to support its space sector, including the development of advanced radar imaging satellites. Saudi Arabia announced that it will invest $2.1 billion into its space program. Arabsat, a satellite company headquartered in Riyadh, operates a fleet of 7 satellites providing services across the Middle East and North Africa. Furthermore, the Borgen Project in 21 argues that newly developed satellites are a vital weapon to fight poverty from space. India's space program accentuates the use of satellites to analyze rainfall and other conditions on Earth to optimize agricultural production. Robinson in 2010 concludes 60% of the Indian workforce is agricultural, and Singh 22 concludes 194 million people, or 14% of India, is malnourished, and India in itself is the largest contributor of undernourished people. The second benefit is through supercharging India's space sector. India's space sector lacks its last remaining puzzle piece. Bandari 21 writes, India needs partners in this domain. Considering the long-term period of space projects, India would do well to partner with the reliable spacefaring countries that have a track record of cultivating strong players in space. To begin a coherent space policy that encourages private actors, India's participation in multilateral mechanisms is the right format. Thankfully, signing the Accords would give India the spacefaring connections it desperately needs. JOI in 2022 argues, it's essential that India be in the Artemis Accords so it can gain lesson and expertise from other members. Robotics from Canada, avionics from Japan, and deep space network expertise from the US and Australia. Additionally, affirming would integrate India's private sector. JOI continues, India's space companies could become part of a global supply chain. This would help attract investment capital towards Indian space startups. Empirically, Whittingham 22 finds that by signing the Accords, Nigeria and Rwanda made themselves more attractive to international investment in their space sectors. As a result, companies ran to them. The White House in 2022 confirms U.S. companies announced new investments in Africa, drawing upon space data to expand health and agriculture. Critically, India's private sector is key to space success, as Rajagopalan 20 concludes that India's space competitiveness has suffered from the absence of a globally reputed private space industry. And Shaijuman 22 finds the space sector is generating millions of high-tech jobs in India, and it is driving innovation and modernization of Indian technological leadership, which is why McKinsey 21 quantifies that new space tech could have a combined economic impact of $1 trillion a year in 2025. This growth is key. DFID 22 explains that rapid economic growth was crucial to reduction in poverty. And CARS 22 quantifies that in India in 2019, economic growth lifted 77 million people out of poverty. Thus, we affirm. Yeah, just give me like 2 seconds. All right. Wait. All right. Time will start now. That's not for the question.
Okay, so 2 months ago, India and the U.S. announced a new initiative to collaborate with each other in space technology. What is this? What did Artemis Accords do that is canon?
This is an investment. What you're talking about is just some random project that India and the U.S. started.
That's not a project, it's just them stepping up their space collaboration.
Okay, so that makes it even better for us. Just
No, it
space
doesn't.
collaboration
They don't
doesn't
need
mean.
it. They don't need the
No, but
Accords.
that's not investment though. You haven't you haven't told us that's investment. That's just collaboration. They can collaborate with anyone right
No,
now,
they're already
but the
getting
only way from who?
like just the general investment.
Can you
Plus,
quantify
they
how
work-
much?
I mean, I probably can't tell you a number, but they
Yeah.
do work with like every country. They work with the China-Russia bloc. They work with the U.S. bloc.
All right, awesome. So
They're
we
getting
can.
the investment from there.
Okay, yeah, we can tell you we can give you an actual quantified number of investment. Look to UAE and Saudi Arabia. The UAE have invested 879 million. Saudi Arabia has invested 2.1 billion. And then for Nigeria and Rwanda, I believe it was your own team that stated that Rwanda has received 2 billion in investment and Nigeria's received like 3 billion. So we would say that.
Because of the Artemis Accords, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, why?
But we tell you that because the Artemis Accords were signed, they attracted a lot of private investment from other they attracted a lot of private investment from private companies such as like SpaceX. They established Starlink in Nigeria.
But what we tell you in our case is that India is working with the U.S., Russia, and China. They're working with both sides because they're maintaining. strategic
Yeah, but you haven't
neutrality.
seen them actually. You haven't given us actual investment. You just say sure, there's investment. How
Okay, but
much?
the
You
issue
can't answer.
Is that they cut off half their investment when India signs the Accords, they are cutting off essentially half of their collaboration work, right? And that's not going to be good for them. And that means that the investment that they're getting doesn't matter because the trade is going to be cut off. Their economy is going to be in shambles because 100 million people are cut off from this essential trade.
All right, let's talk about trade then. So so you're saying that because India and China are going to have such high tensions that they're going to cut trade, right?
India and China? No, we
Yeah.
say that China cuts off trade in retaliation to India's
Okay,
trade
yeah.
accords.
So you would say with the U.S. leading the Accords, then how is China still trading with the U.S.?
What does that mean?
It means that so it doesn't matter then because
so
if
it's not
India
retaliation. The U.S. created the Accords. The issue is that China knows they have a huge amount of power over
Yeah.
India's trade, right? And they have already announced that they will retaliate if India signs the Accords. And that retaliation it takes the
what was
form-
their announcement?
Do you want me to? I can give you the evidence later. But
Yeah, I
the
agree.
issue is that since they know they are India's number one trading partner, but India doesn't even make the top 10 of their trading partners, it's not an issue for them to cut off all the trade into India.
Then why haven't they like done
They
anything with
haven't done it yet
America?
because they haven't signed the Accords. And
No,
that's
no,
why
I'm
India
talking about
hasn't signed the
America,
Accords.
right? With the U.S. being such a large partner to China, even when their interests are completely separate. How is India any different? Like what is?
India is different because it is currently a strategic neutral power between the two. Like it's the only strategically neutral country because it's right next to China, but it also works with the U.S.
Right.
And the reason why it hasn't cut off the trade yet is because it hasn't signed the Accords, and that's why they haven't signed the Accords in the past 3 years.
All right. You guys want to take prep? Oh wait, okay. Wait, can I see the evidence? That's like, what was it in cross?
Deemed like China announced that they already had the money.
Yep.
Are we taking prep?
Is that how it works here?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Wait, but you guys are looking for the car. Okay, do you want me to just
the
take?
prep will start once we get.
Yeah,
Once we
give
show
me a
you the
second.
card.
All right, sure. I'll just have it on here.
What are you looking for?
I'm looking for the there's two of them.
There's two. Okay.
What's the card?
Just let me know
So
when you
it's
find it.
this. Okay, I can't really send it to you because we don't have Wi-Fi, but
Yeah, I'll just look at it.
so this is our rhetoric here, but there's like more
So
stuff.
which ones do I read? It's this and
Yeah, so the rhetoric, like
Let's start
the
once I
orange
start.
thing is inside here, but give me another.
What are you looking for?
I want because
Can
she
you
read
find
in
the
cross
other
that
one?
like China's immediately going to retaliate against India
No, they said we've
if
said
they
that.
sign.
Oh, that's our evidence from Higgins 17.
Oh, it's the Higgins one.
Yeah.
That,
I'll just start once I start
China
reading it.
said say, here.
That one.
All right, time will start now.
There's a couple others if you want to see them, but that's
Oh,
just, like,
Higgins.
the
Okay,
first
sick.
one.
Okay, if that's your strongest link, that's cool.
No, there's some more, but
There's
you wanna see
more.
them?
Are they stronger? That's like your main link, though, right? Like,
We have,
can check
we have a
after.
couple links, but
We
like.
can check after.
okay, that was 11 seconds. Just an idea of climate, like India and China, like create the most like climate change right now. Like,
Okay.
they have like high carbon emissions.
It'll just be going down.
Trying to lower it. That's it.
I'm just ready. Teach. Let's start the time. Now, the thesis of our case is that while collaboration may be good, India increasing its collaboration with certain allies at the expense of other allies is at best a zero-sum game, and realistically going to cause several devastating harms to India because India's signing would just antagonize China. That's going to be the fundamental problem with their case. They tell you, overarching, that India signing the Artemis Accords is really good because it opens things like collaboration. But the problem of this is that even if they can increase a few jobs, increase a little bit of collaboration, what we would tell you is that would just come at the expense of China. As our Schumann evidence explains, that China would view India signing the Artemis Accords as India siding with one side over China because the Artemis Accords are led by the US. That being said, let's deal with their case proper. In their first argument about agriculture and satellites, they say that the ISRO, the Indian Space Agency, has been receiving less funding than NASA. However, we would tell you two things. One, NASA and US is obviously way larger. That's not a good comparison with no actual impact. Second, we would tell you that the reason for underfunding recently is because of COVID. COVID happened, which diverted tons of funds to other places. Then, they tell you in their first argument that the Accords can increase things like tech sharing and funding for satellites. But we would tell you that the White House, however, as the White House explained less than 2 months ago, post-stating all of their evidence, the US and India have begun an initiative on sharing both information and technology between the governments, businesses, and academic institutions of both countries. This is independent of the Artemis Accords and already creates all of the tech sharing that they themselves talk to you about. Remember this because Michaela points it out in Crossfire. It's going to be really important in this debate. The second response we would give you on increasing things like tech sharing is we would tell you, as Newton 21 explains, the Accords do not actually mention anything new about tech sharing, and there are pre-existing agreements that do the exact same thing as the Artemis Accords. To clarify, tech sharing is sending technology from one country to another. The information sharing specifically isolated in the Artemis Accords is just the US saying, hey, I found a new rock on the moon, how cool. The third response we would give you is tell you that the Artemis Accords are once again just focused on space exploration and mining, not satellites or carbon capture. Make them read a line of the Artemis Accord that specifies anything about climate change or satellites or actual tech sharing that is new and not with the pre-existing agreements. Now, let's go to the second argument they give you about India's space sector. Here, they tell you that the Artemis Accords would increase investment by opening India to a global supply chain, but that's not true. The reason they give you why investment would occur with the Artemis Accords is because India can now collaborate, which makes it more viable as an investment. That being said, remember the White House evidence I just read you, which tells you that India and the US are already opening their collaboration as per 2 months ago, which means that the investment is already happening. In Crossfire, Aubin tries to tell Michaela that we can't quantify any of the investment, but the problem is that's just impossible. They can't even quantify their own investment that would increase it. If we can't quantify it, and they can't quantify it either, that's not a reason for you to vote against us. That being said, we would tell you, even if there isn't any investment that directly increased right now, we need to let time for it. The collaboration started 2 months ago. That's obviously not enough time for investment to reach its maximum potential. Then, they bring up this example of Nigeria and Rwanda, and tell you how when they signed the Artemis Accords, they increased their investment. 2 problems with this. First, the difference between Nigeria and India is that Nigeria wasn't already collaborating with countries like the US, but while India is. So when Nigeria signed the Artemis Accords, that was their first opening to collaboration, whereas India signing the Artemis Accords would not be opening any new collaboration different as per our White House evidence. But second, we would tell you that Nigeria is a much smaller country. It's way easier to invest in with much less risk than investing in a global superpower like India. That being said, to maintain India's position of strategic neutrality in a world fueled by wars and pandemics, we are so proud to negate.
Take prep.
Take running, I guess.
Not yet. You can start whenever you want.
3, 2, 1, start. Alright, that was 34 seconds. Do you permit off-time rib nuts?
All right, so first I'll be defending my own case, and then I'll move on to attacking your case. So in 3, 2, 1. So Judge, first I'll be defending my own case. They tell you first that India is already getting investment. A, they don't say how much they're already getting, and B, this argument doesn't stand because sure, even if they're already getting investment, affirming only further improves this investment regardless. Now, on agriculture and satellites, they said that the underfunding is due to COVID. Yeah, obviously, but we're still going to tell you that there's a massive difference between NASA and ISRO, and this massive difference is huge, and obviously that's why we say that affirming is better because you can lessen this difference, provide more funding for the ISRO, which will help them rebound from COVID. Now, on increasing investment and the global supply chain, they can only non-unique this argument, but Judge, like we said, affirming leads to even more investment, so regardless, this doesn't stand, right? And sure, we're saying that there will be more investment the moment that they affirm, and they just keep saying that there's already good investment. But like we said, in case following the signing of the Artemis Accords, both the UAE and Saudi increased their funding to their space programs, with UAE establishing $817 million to fund its space sector, and Saudi investing $2.1 billion. Now, on Nigeria and Rwanda, first, they said that Nigeria and Rwanda didn't really partner with any of other countries. First, this is just completely wrong because Rwanda collaborated with Japan and Canada, which are two signatories of the Artemis Accords prior to the Accords themselves. Now, they said that Rwanda is smaller, and exactly that's why we're saying India signing is so important. Since they are larger, the impacts will be larger, right? They'll be scaled. Now, onto their case. So first, responding to strategic ambiguity. Recently, India has been siding more with the US regardless. They have joined the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, a military campaign against China. They don't have the strategic ambiguity anymore, and with border conflict with China and Russia, we won't try to pretend like these relations are good right now. India is working more and more with the US, and they have proven this multiple times. First time in Cross, they said that 2 months ago, India and US stopped the collaboration, and later in rebuttal again, they said that India is working more with the US, and they've been signing more and more, and so this completely goes against their whole point because China has done nothing about any of these points. India and the US are already collaborating. They agree, so why hasn't China done anything? Now, on China, CRS 22 finds that India is already part of the Quad, an alliance used directly to defend against China. Now, if their entire contention about angering China was true, then we would have already seen these tensions escalate when India had first joined. Now, if they can join a military alliance against China, then they can join a space program that is minimal in comparison. Montague 19 writes, officials say now that the US exercises more with India than any other non-NATO partner. Now, on cutting trade and sanctions. First off, the sanctioning on Lithuania is literally about Taiwan. It has nothing to do with space. But even then, China and the US hate each other. Everyone can agree on that. But recently, two-way trade between the US and China set a new world record in 2022 of $690 billion. So even though the two countries hate each other, there is still trade. They are still trading. The economy is still going up. And so this sanctioning of India will never happen because China also relies on India for some of its own materials. And Lithuania, that was about Taiwan. It's not relevant to the Artemis Accords. Now, they try to tell you that in the status quo, India and China can work together. But like we said before, India has given up its ambiguity when it signed the Quad. Now, on climate change. First, with this argument, you have to jump through so many hoops, right? First, you have to prove that India and China are willing to work together. Second, you have to prove that they will work together on climate change before anything else. And third, you have to prove that by them working together, they can actually solve for climate change in time before climate becomes irreversible. And our opponents have not proven any of this, and therefore you shouldn't buy this climate change impact. Now, meanwhile, our agricultural data is helping 60% of the Indian workforce and is lifting 400 million people out of poverty, and it's helping 141 million malnourished people in India, and thus we outweigh on scope and magnitude, and we are proud to affirm.
Alright, you ready for crossfire?
Yes. All right, sure. Yeah, I'll come up.
Since I spoke first. Can I take the first question?
Yeah.
Alright, great. Let's start the time now. You talk a lot about quantifying investment.
Right.
How much investment would it increase in India if India signs the Artemis Accords?
Right, so obviously it's all complete speculation because India has not signed, right? But we're telling you with previous historical precedents of countries like Rwanda, of countries like Nigeria, of countries like UAE, Saudi,
Okay.
they increase their investment, and we can give you numbers for that if you want.
you say that Nigeria and Rwanda were collaborating with other countries prior to their signing.
Yes.
Can you give me some of those examples?
Like Canada and Japan, they helped like spun like a satellite.
So you
for
talk about one
Rwanda.
satellite, and then you talk about avionics from Japan.
Right.
That is nothing near the scale of the Artemis Accords and the White House government evidence we gave you. When the US and India stepped up their collaboration 2 months ago, that was way more than just one satellite or just avionics from a country like Japan.
Oh, exactly.
That was sharing all of their tech, all of their business, which is why we are saying that India uniquely is already in the global supply chain. They are already at their maximum amount of collaboration because of the agreement that happened 2 months ago by the White House. That being said, you're welcome to take a question.
Right, okay, so first of all, on like your climate change, like can you prove that like by not signing the accords, India and China will somehow collaborate to solve climate change
Okay.
in time before climate is
Sure.
irreversible?
Sure, so 2 things. First, our German Institute 22 evidence goes conceded and explains to you that tensions spill over. So even if the tensions originate in just the Artemis Accords or the space sector, what our German Institute evidence tells you is that those tensions will spill over into other sectors like climate. Then our German Institute furthers this by saying that the only way to reach net zero is when India and China are collaborating. Right now, they are collaborating under the COP27 framework. Unfortunately, that would be one example of a framework that would be absolutely destroyed if India signs the Artemis Accords.
Sure.
Okay, so, yeah. Let's talk about the Quad.
Mm-hmm.
Is the Quad more of like a mutual agreement, would you say, or would you say it's more like led by the US? Or would you say it's more like would you say that the Quad is led by the US, or it's like 4 countries
I would say
collaborating
it's
equally?
more led by the US.
Are you sure?
Okay, I have a question. So you said that like, okay, do you still believe that India has like the strategic ambiguity when they've been like signing so much with the US? Like, you
Okay,
said yourself?
sure. So our Zhang Shui evidence from 2022, which postdates everything you guys talk about, tells you that right now, the border tensions and the overall collaboration between India and China has shown a momentum of recovery. It's gone on track to the point where they can collaborate, India can be a mediator. You come up in rebuttal and talk a lot about how like, like right now, India, or you guys say that like India and China are not having good relations because India is signing all these things.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the Quad.
Yeah.
The problem with like the Quad, for example, is that when India signed the Quad, what we saw is China step up their tensions in the South China Sea, which was a direct result of which was a direct result of India
Right,
signing
but they
the
didn't
Quad.
sanction India, right? Like, which is
That's just one
what
example.
happened.
Furthermore, they like what Michaela will tell you is as per the Chopra 20 evidence, as soon as India signed the Quad, China stepped up their diplomatic protests, which absolutely destroyed the COP26 negotiations.
Okay, sure.
Wait, could I see the part on like destroying the COP26 negotiations?
I mean, we call that mostly analytic, but I can give you the cards for that.
Oh yeah, sure. And like, if you could add like context, like what those are. I hope they're in the
Absolutely.
card.
So COP26 was an agreement to reach net zero by 2026.
Climate. Okay. And that was just to so it was India cut. Here, let me just read the card.
Which card are you looking for?
They cut off. For the caught like after, like directly after caught.
Yeah. We don't have the card, but here's at least what we have verbatim,
Okay.
and then
Verbatim. Okay, I have.
you don't have to do it.
All right.
Because
I take
I
my.
can't access it.
Like 20. Tensions being so okay.
We don't have the card.
Yeah, I got you. Are you guys taking prep or?
We'll run like a minute or so.
Come on.
I'll start the time now.
Almost done. I think, wait. I'll start it. Immediately
We have 15 seconds.
So, everybody ready? So for outtime roadmap, it's going to be my case, the weighing, and then their case. Start. The problem with my opponent's case is that India is not facing a problem. Right now, India maintains the status of strategic neutrality that allows them to collaborate with both the US, Russia, and China. Their economy is currently recovering from COVID, which is the main reason why many projects failed, don't let them tell you otherwise, and their economy is also experiencing a significant upturn. To clarify, Schumann evidence says they are the world's mediator. They are the only ones who can resolve tensions between the US and China. This is big in this debate. Without the mediator, the world is opened up to a full host of devastating impacts. Their first response to this is that about the Quad. The Quad doesn't matter for two reasons. First, the Quad hasn't done anything. China and India's relations have actively improving right now. China is also anti-US. The Quad isn't run by the US like the Accords are. They haven't said extremely hostile statements like they have with the Accords, and China views space as important over other things. Even so, China did respond to the Quad by issuing diplomatic protests and stepping up tensions in South China Sea. When they signed the Accords, China retaliates because they view the Accords as US-centric. There's three harms from this. The first is increased risk of aggression and why they didn't respond to this. The second is trade cutoff. Remember, there's a huge power imbalance. Don't let them tell you that they're equally reliant. China is India's top trading partner, and India doesn't even make it to the top 10 of China's. They can easily cut off their trade. It would be easy to cut off because they aren't equally reliant. You don't need to jump through hoops to get to our climate impact. China and India are having upturn in relations right now. This is a good setup for collaboration, and in our world, first we have evidence for this. We are the only risk of climate cooperation. They have none because China cuts off India after the Accords are signed. On the weighing, it's an easy vote for the act because we're the only side with solvency. We're the only side that decreases risk of war, maintains the world's mediator, and allows trade. You can't vote for any of their economy impacts because once China cuts off trade, then their economy will immediately go to shambles because 100 million people don't have the resources they need from Chinese trade. On their case, first on agriculture, they say that there's a massive difference between NASA and the ISRO. Maybe if you compare them directly, the issue is in proportion to the space sector of each country, the ISRO is a huge global power. And COVID diverted funds anyway, so this is an unfair comparison. And also tax sharing wouldn't even happen, it's literally not in the Accords. And finally, on their second intention, investment occurred in other developing countries because they can now collaborate. The issue is in India already collaborates with much of the world. The problem is the Accords don't allow India to collaborate more. They cut off half their collaborators, making them collaborate less, so they won't get investment impacts. Thanks.
Wait, did you say texturing? Like I didn't.
Text sharing, what Connor talked about in his rebuttal.
Wait, what is texturing? I don't.
Text
Text
sharing.
sharing.
Text sharing.
Oh, texture. I was so
Texturing.
yeah. Wait, texturing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we'll take prep. Time will start now. Wait, can we take like a Jaden? Do you
No,
wanna-
it's fine.
It's fine. Okay, cool. All right. Prep time will resume now. Wait, what's like the fucking easily cut off trade? I mean, that was a minute 20, so I don't know what that adds up to. Should be less than 2 minutes, so actually, wait. It'll be starting on our arguments, we'll be weighing, and we'll be moving on to their arguments. Cool.
Yeah.
Is anybody not ready? No. In that case, time will start. Now, the place you sign your ballot for TJ is on our argument on promoting prosperity. The Artemis Accords generate massive benefits for both India and Accord members. If India opts to sign the Accords, it will open up an important avenue for cooperation. The Accords will lead to numerous development and investment in satellites. Look to UAE and Saudi Arabia. They increase their investment in space. They say no quantification, we'll provide it. $897 million for UAE and $2.1 billion for Saudi Arabia. These are crucial as India is using satellites to analyze rainfall and on Earth to optimize agricultural production, lifting millions out of poverty. Additionally, the Accords would gain and cause private sector investment from countries like Canada, Japan, and Australia. That happened in Nigeria and Rwanda. They say no quantification. No, we're telling you $2 billion in Rwanda, $3 billion in Nigeria. This would generate millions of jobs in India and drive innovation, generating over $1 trillion of economic growth per year, helping the average citizen. They gave a couple responses. First is that the only reason the ISRO failed is because of COVID. No, the ISRO has been failing for a long time. They've continuously said that the ISRO is weak. That's because they haven't had funding. But then they talk about how tech sharing is already happening right now. We'll use that against them in a second. But additionally, we would say this, it doesn't matter. It's only going to increase after you sign the Accords. But then they say that India is cutting off China. All right, then onto the weighing first. Outweigh on probability because everything we say in our case is happening right now when it comes to their impacts. First is war. China and India are never going to go to war. We'll give reasoning later. But then on climate change, additionally, they haven't proven that China and India are even remotely interested in solving for climate change in the first place. Additionally, China, it needs to be a global effort. That's not going to happen just with the Accords. But then onto their case. First, they're trying to extend this war impact. The issue here is that if China is the only response they have given to the Quad is that China has stepped up the South China Sea. But if the Quad is just way more military oriented than the Artemis Accords, then why hasn't war happened? It's because China simply doesn't care. The only example they've given of China cutting ties with a country was when Lithuania merged with Taiwan. Vastly different for two reasons. First, Taiwan is something China is very, very sensitive about, much more than India. And B, this is totally unrelated to space. This is just on the floor diplomatic tensions. It's not about the Artemis Accords. Hey, give me a sec. Oh,
Can I take this question?
yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
Okay. Just let me know you're ready.
Oh, okay. All right. You tell me.
Start now. Let's talk about Chinese retaliation. So
Okay.
you said that China's most sensitive about Taiwan over all things.
Yeah.
So wouldn't you say they're also sensitive about just taking that as an example, they're sensitive about their allies collaborating with people they don't like.
No, this is Lithuania, and Lithuania is not their major
but also,
ally,
but
right?
also from that, we have a bunch of pieces of evidence that say that China specifically has announced opposition to the Artemis Accords.
Yeah, sure.
Specifically, India signing the Artemis Accords. So wouldn't
Yeah,
isn't that
your
kind of
your Haker evidence is just saying that China doesn't want India to do anything.
We also
It
have
doesn't
to
have
make
No. What it tells you is that China does have a history of responding to perceived threats with military escalation, and what it furthers is that if India were to sign the Artemis Accords, because the Artemis Accords are U.S.-centric, and because they are viewed as the most U.S.-centric agreement, that's why China would step up their military specifically in the Artemis Accords. I know that you guys bring up this example of the Quad, right?
Yeah.
You guys say because China didn't do anything when the Quad was signed. The two problems there is that first, China did do stuff. Like Michaela and I both told you in rebuttal and summary. When the Quad was signed, what we saw was China step up their tensions in the South China Sea. They put more battleships there. They put more weapons there, which is why we keep hearing about it in the news and things like Taiwan.
Yeah.
The second problem is that the Quad is fundamentally different because it is not as much led by the U.S. The Artemis
Why is
Accords
it not
are
led by the U.S.?
Okay, so what you have to understand is that the Quad is just 4 countries, okay?
Yeah.
It's just 4 countries collaborating, and literally all the Quad has done is set out a common statement, okay, that they want to ensure security. That's what the Quad has done. The Artemis Accords is an agreement of over 20 countries led by NASA's guidelines that were created by NASA and not as a whole, while Quad is more like a collaborative thing, which is why Artemis specifically is more US-centric.
And so another thing is that when that happens, the only reason that Indo-Chinese relations are getting better right now is because the Quad stopped doing anything.
The Quad. When have you proven that the Quad hasn't done
has
stopped doing
recently,
stuff?
They've stopped doing stuff, right?
When did you read that?
Or
I read
Zhang
that.
Shui evidence.
Yeah.
Zhang
In
Shui
case,
says that.
Extended in rebuttal, extended in summary.
And so
Could you
what-
read it? Could you just read it?
Yeah, okay, well, like verbatim.
Yeah, just read it.
Okay, I
verbatim.
just finished my response. Just kind of
Hey,
ready.
go ahead.
Okay, so the reason that India hasn't signed the accords, we'd say, like, they've been operating for the past 3 years. Why haven't they done it? And we answer that question in our speeches, and that's because they're afraid the Chinese will retaliate, right? And that's the biggest issue. Like, if they were going to do it and nothing would have happened, if they thought China didn't care, then why haven't they
No,
done it?
yeah, right. We would say that the accords were created in 2020. That's just like 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, right? So that's like, okay, you can give the example also, like, go back 4 months ago. 4 months ago, Nigeria and Rwanda hadn't signed the Artemis Accords. And then I could have made the same argument, why haven't they signed yet? The accords must suck. But after they signed, well, I mean, clearly the accords haven't sucked for them. But
Before that, if they're getting
Yeah.
invested
Okay, that
in
doesn't
collaboration,
mean- that doesn't-
takes away half their
The White House
partners.
evidence
No,
was
what?
2022, 2 months ago, explain. I mean,
Oh my
whatever. Yeah, 2 months ago. Whatever.
Oh my God,
I'll get into that.
wait, could I see, like, can I just see Zhang Shui? I just kind of want to see it. Man.
Just have to-
Isn't it in the card and not in the rhetoric?
Matter.
Okay.
Zhang Shui, China relations. I believe this much
Like
is
the
verbatim.
Chinese relations is
Shui of the Chinese.
something like that.
They maintain. Okay, cool.
Okay. We've used that for a while.
Yeah. No, wait, you're like
Hey, write this down. Zhang Shui literally is
I
a
guess- I
contextualized
guess we'll
model.
run the
They
last
increase
10
communication
seconds
with
more,
Okay.
They do
Okay.
shit, right? Where? No.
Yeah.
What does the Zhang Shui evidence even say? It literally just says increased communication. Use more connections. Increased communication between India, China. It's bullshit.
Okay. So it's going to be
Wait,
addressing
on probability.
my case, addressing the Wayne, and addressing the case. Joe, ready? Opponents, TJ. Let's start. Time. India's biggest problem right now is that there is no problem. Right now, India is collaborating with the US, as per our White House evidence from 2 months ago. They are mediating between US and China because they are strategically neutral, and they are reaping economic benefits from both countries. That's our case. Now, they've given you one response to our case throughout this round, and they tell you that when India joined the Quad, China didn't do any of the impacts that we talked to you about, like military escalation. But what they have conceded in Crossfire is that, one, China actually did do stuff in response to the Quad. They stepped up their battles in the South China Sea. They built more military outposts, which goes conceded. And two, the Quad is fundamentally different. Even if you don't believe that China did respond to the Quad, what we tell you is that the Quad is literally just 4 countries setting out one guideline that they want security, whereas the Artemis Accords are over 20 countries, led by the US, saying that they want to go to space together without China. That's a pretty clear difference. Now, on our case, by far the cleanest place for you to vote in this round is our impact about trade, which they have completely conceded in their summary speech, where we tell you that China would cut off its trade, which would harm 100 million people who are dependent on that. The second thing we would tell you is that China would step up their military escalation, and the third thing we tell you is that climate cooperation cannot happen unless China and India are allies. Now, the weighing in this round is really simple. You prefer our side for 2 reasons. First, the empirics in this round all go in our favor. Remember the Higgins 17 evidence, which tells you that China will invade Taiwan, India, because they have a history of responding to threats with military escalation. And second, on their case about the economy, even if you buy all of it, remember that since they have conceded the trade argument, we would argue that the trade cutoff would affect the jobs of the millions of people that they talk about. If there's no trade, which hundreds of millions of people rely on, then we're not going to see the same economic benefits they want. But on their case, they have conceded the White House government evidence, which tells you that 2 months ago, India and the US stepped up all of their collaboration in all sectors, absent the Artemis Accords, which means their impacts are already solved. That's why. Oh yeah, and then they say that like we can't quantify, but they can't quantify about India specifically. This is about Saudi Arabia, that's not responsive. Remember that on their second argument too, India's already collaborating, there's no need for any more. It would just come at the expense of China. For these reasons, we see no other ballot today than the negative.
We have a bit of prep, right? I think like
You
one.
have 2 minutes. No.
No, left.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we have like 10 seconds, so.
Alright, let's use our 10 seconds.
15 seconds left, or was it?
They had 15
Alright.
seconds.
All right, let's say 10. It's about 10.
We'll say we have 10 seconds.
All right,
3, 2,
1, go.
Alright, there's our 10 seconds.
Alright, so just a quick offhand roadmap. I'll start off with some weighing, and then I'll move on to their case, and in 3, 2, 2, 1. So judge, the most important argument of the round is advancing agriculture. So first, they say there is no issue in India. This is not true. 400 million people are in poverty and 141 million people are malnourished. Half of India is malnourished and in poverty, and they say there is no issue. Now, their only ever impact is a China sanction on India or a war. And we have not seen any escalation from China when India signed the Quad. Now, they'll say there's war tensions. First off, there's no quantification as to how much these tensions are. And second, because these tensions haven't done anything, and the tensions only matter if there is a war and there wasn't a war. So they lose purely on probability because China has basically done nothing. Now, they have given so much evidence of India and US collaboration. They mentioned this White House thing, repeated it and repeatedly. But why has China not done anything if there is so much collaboration? Now, on climate change, they have no solvency because you have to jump through so many hoops to arrive at this conclusion that China and India will work together to solve climate change. The only response they have to this, that it's impossible to reach net zero without collaboration, but A, they can't prove there will be collaboration, B, they can't prove that they'll make it in time, and C, there's just basically no evidence that China and India will actually work together. Now, going back to this collaboration thing, so our opponents themselves have given so many examples of India and US collaborating, and China has done nothing to India about any of this. Now, they don't respond to our Quad case, or they just tell you that there's increased tension and increased militarization. They don't give a quantification. It doesn't matter because there is no war. On sanctions, Lithuania is an edge case, and it's literally about Taiwan. It has no relevancy to the Artemis Accords. And meanwhile, the US and India have the largest trade in the world at $660 billion, even though they hate each other. So there's basically almost no chance that India will get sanctioned by China. Now, war is simply so improbable because it would have already happened at the Quad, and so therefore we outweigh on scope and magnitude as we're helping 141 million malnourished people and 400 people out of poverty. Oh yeah.
Good.